Welcome to Where You're At, a podcast that highlights the work of alumni from the Journalism and Media Studies Department at San Diego State University. I'm Pete Frank Williams. Our goal is to share the success of alums, inspire current students with these stories, and connect students and alums for mentoring. And now, here's your host, Josh Suchon.
This week on Where You At, we are staying in America's finest city. We are talking broadcast journalism, TV news. We're talking about what it was like to graduate at the start of the pandemic and what it was like trying to find a job during the pandemic. Our guest this week is a fairly recent graduate. His name is Devin Whatley. He is a producer for NBC San Diego. He is a San Diego native. Devin, wonderful to meet you. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Appreciate it.
All right, I'm going to jump right in because the top tweet that you have is pinned. You have a huge smile on your face and you are holding an Emmy. I want to start right there. Tell us about your Emmy. What was the story? What was the background behind this Emmy?
Yeah, so our producer, David Yim, I was writing as sort of like a writer-editor for our 11 p.m. show. And our producer, David Yim, he usually enters in shows for the I forgot what it's called, but it's basically the NATAS PSW Emmy Awards. And he entered in our 11 p.m. show, which was about the Santee plane crash, which I believe happened in 2021, sometime around September-ish, late that year. And he entered it in for team coverage. Usually with those things, it's like you enter it in and you pay some money for the fee, and then you kind of just wait and see to see if you get nominated. You're going up against all these different shows and across the entire West Coast. And after we put our bid in, we get nominated, and then it's like, oh my gosh, we actually find out like it's, we have a chance to win. We actually have, we're going to actually go to the Emmy Awards in Palm Springs. And so we go in June 25th, we go to the Emmy Awards in Palm Springs, me and my mom. And funny enough, it was actually her birthday the day that we went. And we go there. They go through all these different groups as far as the different categories. They get to team coverage and they're going through all the bids. They say all the names. And then they say the winner for team coverage is NBC7. And then it's like we find out we won. And then we go up there and we go and give a speech. And what's funny is they actually hand you the Emmy, but it's not the real Emmy. It's actually like a fake. Not a fake, but it's basically like a placeholder Emmy that you hold on the stage while you're carrying it to say your speech, and then they actually give you the Emmy behind the stage and you get it backstage. And yeah, just we found out we won, and that was like one of the most gratifying things ever. I mean, I'm about to turn 23 on the 29th, and it's like, to find out that you won an Emmy only a year into this thing, it almost, things like that don't happen. So it was just so amazing. And one funny thing I always tell people about is that day I actually was not supposed to work the day that we had that show. I subbed in for someone else because they called out sick. And then it ended up, one thing ended up turning to another, and I won an Emmy. So it just goes to show you that, you never know when those opportunities are going to happen. It's very spontaneous.
Let's go deeper into this. That story, that day, you weren't supposed to be working, but you were. What are some of your biggest memories, your takeaways about finding out about this crash and what we're going to do to cover this crash properly?
Yeah, I remember it happened shortly before I came into work, because usually whenever I work a night side shift, it's from 2:30 to 11:30 at night. And so I think the crash happened around maybe midday-ish, 12 or 1 o'clock. I know we had our anchors rolling on breaking news at that point before I even came in. And so, at that point, we're just finding out like, what video can we get from the neighbors? What are people saying around it? So we had like 3 reporters out there. As far as like covering this properly, we're trying to think of several things in mind. One, how do we showcase this and tell people the facts, and also not get mixed up into any speculation or rumors? Because obviously with big events like that, you can get caught up in those things. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to make sure that we get the proper facts. And then also we're trying to get additional perspective. So that night with that show, we got sound with an aviation expert. We had one of our anchors talk to an aviation expert about the flight path of the plane, why the doctor suddenly veer to the right, what sort of causes could be coming from that, what could the FAA and the NTSB be thinking in those sorts of scenarios, what are they going to be looking for. And then we also had sound with people about what they just experienced. I mean, obviously in those moments it's very hard, but as journalists we kind of have to be able to find a way to connect with people, and people really connect with other people when you're dealing with sort of these emotional situations and these hard situations. It really hits home for a lot of people. So I think not only getting the facts, but also being able to add on additional perspectives so that our viewers can kind of gain a different understanding beyond just what happened. I think to kind of form it'll help them form different judgments on this sort of story.
When it comes to getting the facts and getting the facts straight correctly, Twitter can be such a great resource for getting information, but it can also lead you down, that can also be inaccurate. What are some of the guiding principles for you and your colleagues in the newsroom on taking advantage of social media platforms, but also being cautious about what you're seeing and reading?
Yeah, what makes it's such a great question, because for us, we have several people who work on the assignment desk, and basically the assignment desk is like a group of people who are designated towards basically getting all the facts. They send out all the emails to PR people, to public officials, to any media officers for the county, and all these other, anything that you can imagine, even checking social media and asking people about videos and stories and that sort of thing. They do all the verification for us as producers so that we can solely focus on the shows itself and how we can showcase the information and the stories the best that we can. And so as far as the assignment desk people, I mean, they have tons of different ways. I mean, thousands, even maybe sorts of methods that they can go about by checking information. And what's great about the people that we have is that they consistently always, without going head first and going too fast, they always make sure to ask questions and always make sure to verify information first. Mm-hmm. So I think for us, it's just having a team like that that's able to sort of offshore that information for us, and then also being able to have a good sort of communication barrier between us and the assignment desk as far as us being on the same page. It helps a ton as far as getting our shows on air and making sure that we're presenting the right information for viewers.
I love the teamwork that's involved in all of this. Take a step back. Again, you're a fairly recent graduate. Describe for me the emotions of getting this job and being involved with this teamwork on a regular basis and being able to put out content and stories like this that led to this award, this Emmy.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. They hired me 3 years ago, back in 2020, when I was actually a senior at San Diego State. I got hired as a content producer, as basically a writer, editor. And I was only working maybe 1 or 2 days out of the week. I was only working Friday, Saturday. So I was having to balance classes and projects, obviously, at school, and then go to NBC Friday and Saturday and have to go do my 8-hour work job. And, it was hard. I will admit, like, at first it was scary. I mean, I was like the youngest person in the room. I mean, I still am, but you're the youngest person in the room, and you're dealing with like people who've been in the business for like 16, 15, 13, 20, so many years. And you almost just kind of feel like a fish in the ocean trying to barely stay above water. I mean, that's what it kind of felt like for me. And, I think one of the biggest things is you have to just have confidence in yourself. And that's what I would say to a lot of journalists is you're going to deal with a lot of trouble and a lot of like stress and doubt and things like that. But the biggest thing is you have to have confidence in yourself and knowing that, okay, this job's going to help me get to where I want to go. It's going to get that foot in the door and that sort of thing. And so I would just say have confidence, have trust, don't doubt yourself, because I mean, that easily can happen, especially when you're doing your first job. I mean, it happens.
So we're going to end up bouncing around, because that's what I love about podcasts is I don't want these to go like in this linear fashion. So, but you mentioned getting started at NBC. That's 2020, right? That's what you said, 2020. All right. So March of 2020 is when the world changed completely. And we're still recovering from the changes. Give me more details about how it was that you got hired. Give some advice to students on what you did to get hired at NBC, and kind of like what that 5-month stretch was like, from getting hired and being a senior and the world is shutting down and you're trying to like figure out all of this at the same time.
Yeah, it's funny because in March, I actually was like I think it was like my sophomore, junior year. And then COVID hit and I'm doing classes online and things like that. And then you get to my senior year around September. And I was in a class, JMS 445, with TV and news producing, with Jerry McCormick. I don't know if he still teaches that class now, but he was critical in helping me get that job at NBC, because we were doing a lot of exercises with broadcast writing and producing and things like that. And he saw a lot of talent in me. And so we had the news director at the time, Greg Dawson, do a Zoom call with the class. And Greg was actually talking to Jerry about possibly having a few people that could, be open to doing a job in the newsroom at the time. And Jerry forwarded my name to Greg. And I emailed Greg first time, don't get no response. So I hit him up again like a week or 2 weeks later. I'm like, hey, I was in Jerry's class and I heard that there were possibly any part-time positions opening. Like, do you have, any information? And then I finally hear back from Greg and he's like, we don't have anything open right now, but I'll forward your name to the producers in case there is any openings and we'll just go from there. A couple weeks pass by. I get an email from the then EPs, executive producers, Cameron Biltucci and Renee Gonzalez. They told me about this part-time job and, to go through the interview process. I ended up accepting it. That's how I got my job at NBC. And then obviously, going from writer to now being a TV news producer, as far as advice, I would just say the biggest thing that was helpful for me was networking. If I hadn't known Jerry, if I hadn't known Greg, if Jerry didn't know Greg, if Jerry didn't know all these other people, if I didn't know Jerry, right, I wouldn't have gotten the job that I have today. So I think the biggest thing is for students is be able to network with people. I think networking is like the biggest thing that I cannot stress enough that helps people in this business. Not only will it help you get it may help you get your first job, but say you meet somebody and they may not have a job for you right away. Say you get a job now and then 2-3 years down the road, that same said person comes back to you saying, oh, I have an opening. They see what you do. And then all of a sudden that gets you into a bigger job in a bigger market. So networking, it'll help you get a job now. It can help you get a job later. So that's one of the biggest things I can stress on students is be able to network with people, get to know people, because these people, everybody wants to help each other. And this is going to help you lead to get a better job is with networking.
The other thing that I liked about the story you just told, Devin, is that you initially reached out, you didn't hear anything, and then you followed up again. And I know that even as long as I've been in this industry, I doubt myself on how much is too often to follow up. At what point do you become annoying to somebody versus at what point are you persistent? And the good thing about being a journalist is that if you are following up with someone for a second time, for a third time, for a fourth time, and you're still getting ghosted, it's still crickets. You can tell people in those emails or in those phone calls, like any good journalist, I'm following up again. And it's such a great line that you can use where you can say, yes, I know that I might be annoying to you right now, but that's the type of persistence that I'm going to bring to your newsroom if you hire me, is that I'm not going to take no for an answer until I get the story. And so I love that you followed up and kept following up with people.
Yeah, that's, like I said, I can stress about that enough. And then another thing too is like not only being able to follow up with people, but being able to present them with something that shows that how you can make an impact in their workplace, in their newsroom. That's one of the biggest things I think people forget is like, if you're doing a resume or a cover letter or whatever, these people don't know who you are. They may not know who you are personally. They may not, they've never seen you before. So I think if you can figure out a way in your writing to show how exactly you can make a difference in their work. For me, I would watch NBC7 shows being like, trying to get a gist of how I can produce a show. I would watch a show and figure out, okay, how did they present this and that sort of thing. I would be in the control room trying to see how people produce shows. Like if you can get yourself into that mindset of understanding how people think and how people do their jobs at the station that you want to work at, those ambitions will help you end up landing the job that you want to be in, because people are going to understand like, okay, this is how he's going to help, or this is how he or she's going to help our job, our workplace. And they show that they're going to do it, how they're going to do it. And so that helps them get a better message of who you are as a journalist, who you are as a person.
Let's talk more about your day-to-day. Let people know, news producer, what are things that you thought the job was, and what things do you realize the job is that you didn't think of? And I think that'll help people understand more like what you do so that they can start to wrap their head around, this is something I might be able to do.
Yeah, for me at first, I thought a news producer was just like somebody who, helps run the show. Like I didn't think of them as like actually building out the show from scratch. One of the things that really shocked me, like at first, because before I hit NBC7, I had zero experience in broadcast news. I had no sort of prior experience. I was very, very evergreen. And I go in there, and what shocked me the most is, like, as a producer, you're dealing with so much. I mean, you have, not only do you have, say I come in at like 2:30, my show's at 11 p.m. I got that chunk of time to build a 30-minute show, and you have all these different elements you have to deal with, from weather to sports to multiple reporters. What are they going to do? What are they going to turn in? How do you sort of build your stories around those reporters? What stories do you have to think of? Because in a 30-minute show, your time's limited as far as what you can use. So sometimes some stories that are in the earlier shows may not end up being in your show at all, because you just don't have the time, or they just don't fit the theme. And so you have to think about all these sorts of things. And another thing that really surprised me with producing is, like, every show, there's a sort of flow or a theme to it. Every story is meant to connect with each other when you go from the top down in our show. And I encourage people, when you watch our newscast, watch it from the beginning to the end, and you'll see how these themes sort of correlate with each other. And it's not by like mistake. It's actually done on purpose, because we want to get you to keep watching. We want to get you to care. We want to get you to think. And these are sort of the things that producers have a lot of power over, is, we have to put ourselves in the mindset of the viewer. How can they get the most out of the show as possible? Those are a few of the things that really kind of shocked me at first as a producer. Producers do a lot of work, deal with a lot of stress, but it's a very humbling and building job, because it really shows you, like, the power of journalism, and what your impact is on people in the world, and also what you can do in this sort of field. It shows you what you can do. I think it increases your capability and your mindset on yourself.
So if you get to work at 2:30 and the show's at 11, and so it finishes at 11:30, describe for us kind of the emotions that you're feeling, pride that you're feeling, the exhaustion that you might be feeling, kind of how long it takes to kind of wind down from that as you get ready to go to bed or get ready for the next day. Kind of give us the emotions that's involved when you've completed this show.
Oh, I mean, afterwards you just feel relieved. I mean, it's because the thing is like, you could have a set show by 10 o'clock, and then breaking news happens, your whole show blows up, right? And everybody's going to be looking to you as the person responsible for this stuff. Like, you're going to have to figure out how to not only add this breaking news in, but build a show around that, right? And so, you're feeling relieved I feel relieved after every show's over. I mean, especially because it's a grind trying to do this. It's not easy. Mentally, it's very tough. It's exhaustive. It's stressful. In the past, I used to feel scared, honestly, trying to go into producing shows, because it was like, oh my gosh, like, I have this big weight and responsibility on my shoulders. Everybody's counting on me to do this. Like, you kind of feel that sort of self-doubt in yourself. Like, can I really do this? And, one of the biggest things that one of my coworkers used to tell me was like, nobody's going to die. Nobody's going to get injured. Nobody's going to, hurt themselves after doing the, nobody in here is going to die or do anything crazy after the show. So, don't stress out. Like, because if a show goes wrong, the best thing that's going to happen is you get another day tomorrow to do another one. So that's been the mindset I kind of go about doing when I go to work every day is, everything may hit the fan, or you may have a show that just goes off the rails and somehow it ends. But the greatest thing is you get to go again tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's such great life advice, but especially for journalists who put so much into what they do, whether it's a daily 30-minute show, whether it's a magazine, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a baseball game, that, there's another one tomorrow. You're never as good as your best broadcast. You're never as bad as your worst broadcast. You've mentioned the word stress a couple of times. What's your advice? What are some of the things that you do to try to make sure that you don't get too stressed out, or just to kind of like get away and give your mind a break and give your body a break from what can be a very stressful newsroom?
I'm off Monday, Tuesday. On my days off, I don't even use my phone. I stay away from my work emails. I try to do a lot of fun things. I go out on the beach for walks. I go out to UTC and to Mission Bay a lot, do walking there, get coffee, go grab food, go buy clothes, whatever. I do a lot of fun things on my days off, because the more that I keep my mind on my job, the more my ego and myself and my channel is going to end up channeling into my job, the more connected I'm going to become, which can be a little bit problematic, because then if something happens, you end up taking it personally, when in reality, there's nothing really to worry about at all. So I try to just be able to take my time off away from it, go on a walk, go to different places, go explore San Diego, do a lot of different things. I always prioritize health and exercise too. I think those are one of the biggest things that people can often forget is, work is a lot, but you have to squeeze in time for yourself. I don't think there is no situation where you should put work first over your own health or yourself. Always be able to do that. And those are sorts of the ways that I kind of prioritize taking the stress off away from work.
It's time for a quick break from this week's podcast. I'm Amy J. Smith from the class of '98, and I'm a voiceover artist based in Los Angeles. I'm available for film narration, radio and TV commercials, documentaries, how-to explainer videos, and much more. You can contact me at amyvo.com. And now, back to this week's podcast. Here's Josh.
Man, we just met today for the first time on the Zoom, and I'm so impressed with your perspective. I wish that I had your perspective when I was your age. I love it. And I love that you're a San Diego native. You went to high school in San Diego. You went to college in San Diego. I can already tell just from our conversation how much community means to you. Why journalism? Why is journalism something that you wanted to pursue, and why does it matter to you?
I think the impact that it has on people, which is one thing I learned really early in high school. I went to Morris High School and I joined my student newspaper. And funny enough, I didn't join it because I didn't want to do journalism. I actually just joined it because I loved my English teacher who was teaching it. Mm-hmm. And, I remember my first story I did was an opinion story about like why the school bathrooms were not that great. And it ended up being something like I think that the janitors ended up actually the bathrooms ended up getting changed. Funny enough, after a story like that. And I just remember doing these stories about, sports or news or reviews. And I remember I just enjoyed talking to people so much and having these different conversations and asking them questions about like, why do you do this? Like, what's the point of this? What's the impetus of this? Just seeing like the impact that my stories had on various people as I've gone through, through high school, through college, even and now, that's what keeps me going, is just seeing like the difference that I can make in my work. When I was in the Daily Aztec here at San Diego State, I did a feature story about one of the men's basketball players who ended up going to the NBA draft. And like, because a lot of people didn't understand him off the court, and just like how his struggles and his determination that he went through off the court helped fuel his performance on the court. And I think, I get a message from him and his family members afterwards saying like, you did such a great job with the story. And what's funny is I never actually even interviewed him or his family members because none of them reached out to me.
Really?
And so, yeah. None of them, I reached out to them, but none of them got back to me in time for the story to be published. And so I ended up getting a message from them afterwards, like, "Oh, we're sorry that we didn't talk to you, but I mean, you did such an amazing job with the story," and telling them about how he is as a person. I mean, you hit it on the nail, and just like seeing the difference that has on people and the impact that it makes is something that I think is really gratifying and rewarding. And you feel that every time that you do this work in journalism, I think.
Who was the player?
It was Malachi Flynn.
Okay. Who was a great Aztec, and I'm still heartbroken that one of the greatest seasons in Aztec history, the tournament got canceled that year, but that's another topic. I think that's really neat too, because a lot of times we get wrapped up in, if I'm doing a story about person A, I need to interview person A. And a lot of times the best anecdotes don't come from person A. They come from persons B, C, D, E, F, right? Like that's how you really learn about somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. For that story, I think I interviewed one of the men's basketball coaches. I got to interview his high school basketball coach. And then I interviewed one of his close friends who actually was a basketball player at UNLV at the time. And, you get different perspectives because these are people that have been with him, when he was a kid. Like they got to know him when he was young. And so you get that perspective that, sure, he could bring that too, but you also get that additional perspective that I think, typically speaking to just regular sources, you wouldn't get. So I think it's very impactful seeing something like that happen and seeing it all materialize. It was one of the stories I'm still proud of to this day.
I'm proud of you too for that. Another thing that occurred to me as you were telling the story is how journalism can be really good for introverts, because I consider myself an introvert who's been forced to become an extrovert because of what I do and what I wanted to do. And that was such a lengthy process. It's to this day, it is not normal or natural for me to go up to someone and say hi and introduce myself and start talking to them. But journalism sort of forced me, or at least maybe it gave me a reason. It gave me an excuse where I have to talk to this person. I have to ask them questions. It's almost like having this notepad and this pen and this recorder was like a license to go up to a total stranger who I otherwise would not go up to. And correct me if I'm putting words in your mouth here, but I sense a little bit of that in terms of helping you find that confidence in yourself and coming out of your shell, and how journalism can be like, again, like this excuse to talk to strangers.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I mean, for me, when I started college, at San Diego State, I was on the Daily Aztec, but I didn't actually do anything for a year because I was so nervous to go to meetings and actually like do the work. I was just like, oh, am I gonna like, what am I going to do? I was just so nervous and lost. And, I think a lot of freshmen feel that same sort of feeling all the time. And I think that when I went to that first meeting, and I just remember like everybody saying hello to me and being so nice. And I remember the first story I did, and it was about like interviewing one of the professors here over a book that he put out or whatever. And just kind of getting that feeling of like interviewing somebody and you actually get something out of it, and hearing honest, thoughtful, truthful answers. I think it helps build you as a person because, you may not know how to talk to people when you start as a journalist in this business, but by the end of it, I mean, you're going to be able to know how to bridge a conversation and bridge a relationship with people from these interviews that you do with people. And I think it just simply goes to, the more you get more confidence as you do this. And for me, I think I gained way more confidence in myself through programs like the Daily Aztec, through JMS, going through these different classes, going through these different types of journalism that they showcase. It helped me become a better person today.
When you said how nice everyone was, that made me flash back to my time at the Daily Aztec. And I say all the time that I feel so fortunate, not just that I worked at the Daily Aztec, but that the people who were 1 year older than me, that were 2 years older than me, that they were so willing to share and help me. So let's talk some more about how sometimes your mentors are someone who's 6 months older than you or 1 year older than you, and just peers helping peers, and how you kind of help each other, and somebody helps you and then you help them. And, and the beauty of that, and how that makes everyone kind of grow up together.
Yeah, I think the power of teaching, I think, is one of the most underrated things in life, right? Because for me, I remember the first person that I got to know at the Daily Aztec her name was Kaylee Fennell. She was the arts and culture editor. I met her and she showed me how to like actually write an art story, because I had no prior experience. I mean, I did in high school, but I mean, that was months ago, right? So I go in there and I'm like evergreen as can be, not knowing how to write a story at all. And then, I write it and she just blows it up with all these edits on these Google Doc. And she's like, don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. Like, I'm trying to show you how to do this properly. Like, because I can see the talent in you. That's what she told me. She's like, I can see the talent in you. I know how, I can see how you can be better. Mm-hmm. And as I got to do more stories and I got to branch out into different sections. So I went into sports, I went into news, even went into the multimedia section, did some video work. I mean, I got to understand it better just from people like Amal Yunus, people like Jack Moman, people like Aaron Tolentino, Kaylee Fennell, Bella Ross, Michael Klein, everybody. I mean, all these people helped bridge me into crafting a better sort of skill set for myself as a journalist. I think the great thing about the Daily Aztec and even JMS too is like the peers that you're working with, they may be they're 1 or 2 years older than you, but they have so much to show you that you may not understand at first, but you can ultimately get. And what's great is like everybody's kind of young, everybody's in the same sort of space. So you can connect with them in a sec, like people, I always say like the Daily Aztec was like a group of people that like you think on paper you think would probably never connect, never get each other in any sort of sphere, but because they're all journalists, they're united in this sort of bond, right? And that's one of the things I always appreciate about the paper is like it brings a group of people that you necessarily wouldn't think would hang out with each other and do all those sorts of things, but it helps everybody's bridge toward the same goal, which is becoming the best journalist possible.
Dude, 100% about that, because, look, when I was in college, I came from a very middle-class white suburb. And so pretty much all of my existence was that and sports. And going into the Daily Aztec, meeting people from all over California, from all over the country, a variety of ages, people who had gone back to school with their second careers, and learning from them and becoming friends with them. That's one of my biggest takeaways, is that I met a group of people that I otherwise would have never met, and they became friends, and we all learned from each other, and just the way that we bonded, and like we had like just this common goal, and that's how can we put out the best paper that we can every day. And that was so cool to me, and it's some of my most cherished memories.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even, now that I'm at places like NBC, it's sort of that same mindset, right? I'm dealing with people that are like way older than me, in their 50s and their 60s and their 70s, but we all have the same driven mindset, which is we want to put out the best show possible. And that's how we end up working really well together. And I think that's one of the things that I can say for a lot of students here and for journalists anywhere else, is like collaboration and having that same sort of driven goal to succeed is so important, because if you're not on the same page with people, or you're butting heads, it's not going to end well for a lot of people, as far as you're not going to put out the best product. You're not going to put out the best show, things like that. Having the same page with people, or just being on that same sort of communication level, I think is so critical to being successful as a journalist. It can get you to places that you never thought you'd be at before. If I was not as communicative and collaborative with my coworkers, I would have not be able to put out a good show like we did with that Santee show. I would have not have won that Emmy. So having that sort of same level of communication is critical, I think, to being a really, really, really good journalist.
You also mentioned about how you've written arts, you do news now, you've written sports. I know that when I was at the Daily Aztec, I think I wrote one art story, and I think it was about a basketball movie. I think I wrote one news story. I think I wrote one opinion, or maybe my last year, I think I wrote a few more opinions that were not about sports. Anyways, it's about you, not about me. But just when you write about topics, when you do stories about different topics, how does that help you as a journalist when you're not just focused on one type of story?
I think that versatility is one of the biggest assets that can help you as a writer, because being able to have that spear of saying, I know how to write a sports story, or I know how to write an art story, that can help dictate you when those sort of topics cross over into each other, right? So say with, for example, when Fernando Tatis Jr. gets suspended, when that news happens, right, the news people are bringing out the sports people for the top of the show. And then say for the 11 p.m., we're doing like a breakout of it or whatever with the anchor reading a story or whatever. They assign me to write it. I'm going to know what I need to talk about. I'm going to know what the anchor is supposed to say, because I have that gist of understanding. Okay, like I know who this guy is. I know what sports is about. I know what's happening. I know how impactful this is for the Padres and other things like that. So having that sort of gist of understanding sports, or even in that art sphere, same sort of thing. When these topics are going to intersect all the time, and it happens all the time in news, is like you're going to get these sorts of situations where these topics are going to clash with each other, combine. Being able to have that versatility will help you get and make sure that you put out the best story possible, because you're going to know what's going to happen with that. You're going to know what the impact is in the sports world. You're going to know what the impact is in the news world. You're going to know what the news people are going to want to care about with this sports story. They may be confused. They don't know what this is. So you're going to know what they want to know. You're going to be able to tell them what they want to know about. So having that versatility, I think, helps when these topics clash all the time in our field.
One of my favorite things about Steve Fisher, when he was the Aztecs basketball coach, is that he told his players to dream big. A lot of times you'll hear coaches with this, we're just going to take it one game at a time. And Steve Fisher, he told his players, dream about the Final Four, dream about a national championship. He wanted his players to dream big. And I use this as a setup because you're off to a wonderful start in your career. Dream big. What do you ultimately want to do, Devin Whatley, with your career as a journalist?
I think for me, one of the dreams I always wanted to do was help work on a show like 60 Minutes, where you get to build these long form docs and these powerful stories that like people never had any idea of or never knew anything about. And, I always wanted to do something like that, or even branching out into sports. I mean, that's one thing I love sports. I love talking about sports. So any sort of sphere where I'm helping in that sort of intersection as a producer, as a reporter, or that or 60 Minutes, those are one of my dream goals, is to reach that sort of sphere where I can just make content or make stories that are just so awesome and I feel good about every single day.
I love it. 60 Minutes. I mean, that's I mean, that's kind of the gold standard for journalism, right? And of what it means, like you said, to build out a lengthy story and really tell it in a compelling way. And one of the things I love about 60 Minutes is you just never know what type of story they're going to have that week, and might be 3 stories that are totally different, but it ultimately just comes down to storytelling and make this story interesting for someone who didn't think that they would care about this story.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the stories I remember the most is like they had, I think it was John Wertheim. He did a story about how Prince, the estate, was putting out a new album, and they actually went into the archives at Paisley Park and taught, showed through all these different records with all of this writing, all of this stuff like that. And then they play actually some of the new album. And so having that sort of awesome story beyond the story, where you're able to actually go to these places and check out all this amazing things that people have never had a chance to see before, or probably may not even get a chance to see before in their entire lives. I think it's just so awesome. So being able to tell really powerful and deep and thoughtful stories that make people think and make people feel and make people just gain a new perspective on life is just so awesome for me.
A couple of other topics before we wrap up. You also do a podcast called On the Record. Tell us about that podcast. What are the different types of topics for your podcast, hosts or co-hosts or guests, and where we can check it out?
Yeah, so it's a podcast that I host and produce, and I help put all of it together. It's solely me. It's a podcast that I started during the pandemic because it was going crazy staying at home, and I was like, I need something to do. Like I need to do something outside of just going to school, or going to school on my Zoom every day. Like I needed something fun, something exciting. So, I bought some audio equipment. I got a webcam, I got a microphone, and I was just like, let me start a podcast, because that's what everybody was kind of doing at the time. And, it's a podcast about society, culture, journalism. I talk about a lot of different things. I've talked about sports on there. I've interviewed athletes about things like mental health and other impactful stories. Recently, I've been talking to a lot of fellow journalism people in the field. I've talked to news producers. I've talked to reporters. I've talked to anchors. I've talked to people who have recently graduated in the business, a few of my fellow journalism friends and things like that. And so really it's just about, wanting to make a show that people can think and gain new perspective on journalism and storytelling and things like that, but also, different topics like sports or culture or, society and things like that, just making people think and gain a new perspective on life. And that's hopefully what I hope to build out of every episode. And that's kind of the goal and why I've been doing this.
What I find whenever I take on a side project, whether that's a book or a podcast or whatever the case might be, is that it just kind of feeds upon itself. That the more that you do this, the more that it feeds to another idea, more that makes you want to do something else. And that you just never know where one conversation, one assignment, how that's going to lead to another conversation or another assignment, another freelance thing. I know people who've gotten jobs because of their podcast, where they were told, if you can host this podcast, you can keep the conversation going. And so I know that's going to make you good at this job. I'm not as consistent with my own personal podcast as I would like to be. This podcast will be much different. Trust me, Temple Northrop, it'll be much different. but I like that you did that during the pandemic. And I like just the idea that I'm curious. I think that's one of the most important skills for journalists. I'm curious and I want to learn this, and this is going to help lead to this, because that's what it takes to be a really good journalist.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm driven by curiosity. I mean, one of my recent podcasts, I interviewed one of my good friends, Roxy, who I was with at the Daily Aztec, and she's a freelance journalist who has done amazing stories about like things like hi-fi clubs. Like, I don't know what that is, so I'm asking her about what these are, and like, because she did a story about like interviewing like what are the best hi-fi clubs and talking to people about the impact that it has on the community and things like that. And so wanting to have that curiosity and understanding of like, why are you a freelance journalist? Why do you do this story? What's all this about? And you get great answers from it. Another one I did was like, I interviewed one of my coworkers, Todd Strain, who actually covered the Super Bowl in Los Angeles this past year. And so I'm talking to him not only about like what's in his mindset as a reporter when he's covering this game, but like, what are the sort of processes leading up to his live shot at the end of the day? Or what is he going through his head as far as when he's watching the halftime show or doing things like that? Like, I think getting a better perspective of what people go through as reporters, or even, the people that I'm interviewing as athletes or whatever, it helps people gain, I think, a better understanding of like, not only what people go through, but also, I think, a better appreciation of others in life.
You've mentioned a number of different classmates of yours from the Daily Aztec and just now. Brag about somebody. Tell us about somebody who you know who's an SDSU alum who is doing something with communications and you're proud of them. Tell us about another SDSU alum that's rocking it out there.
I'll say one of my good friends, her name's Amber Salas. She's a reporter at, I think, KTIV in Sioux City, Iowa. And, she's in a small market right now, but I think she's amazing, like one of the most amazing people. And she's been killing it ever since I got to know her in college. I mean, she has one of like the best, I think, determinations to succeed that I've ever seen in a person. And, she's gone from doing sports to going and working at Fox as a production person to then making a big leap into the Midwest and, the cold weather and being a sports reporter there. And so she's covering these high school games and doing things like that. And so she's killing it out there. So that's one of the persons I would say I appreciate a lot.
All right. I just wrote down Amber Salas. I'm definitely going to be adding her to my list of alums to use on this podcast as future guests. This week, the alum that I want to brag about, she was in the news. It's actually about a year ago, but it was news to me when I discovered this recently. It'll be news to other people. And her name is Deanna Mackey. I'm cheating by reading from this website right now because I want to make sure that I get everything right. Deanna also worked at the Daily Aztec as Devin did. So I thought that this would be a good person for me to brag about. She's got more than 30 years of experience, and she was recently appointed, this past April, to be general manager for KPBS. She's the first Latina to serve in the role, and so that means she oversees KPBS TV, that's 4 channels, plus 89.5, 97.7, the organization's digital platforms. She actually started at KPBS in the mid-'80s. She departed to run the Daily Aztec, then she went back to KPBS. She's worked at a variety of different places, and now she's back where it all started. Again, her name is Deanna Mackey. She is the new general manager of KPBS. I learned about her doing some research for this podcast, and I think that's super cool.
I mean, I've heard about her before too. So, I mean, kudos to her. And it's like I said, it's great to see people in the Daily Aztec and fellow San Diego State journalism alums succeeding in the field. It's just, it brings a smile to your face.
Yeah, it warms my heart. It's Aztecs helping Aztecs. I almost forgot, Dan Hayes is someone who we both know. I know Dan really well. Him and I have become really good friends and colleagues over the years, even though we did not attend San Diego State at the same time. You've gotten to know Dan. Tell me about just, getting to know Dan, and again, Aztecs helping Aztecs.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. I was actually talking to Daniel Guerrero, who was a former San Diego State alum and a former Daily Aztec alum, and because he happened to mention to me that he was talking to Dan Hayes, and someone who wanted to break out in the sports field. I was like, of course I got to reach out to him. So I sent him a message on Twitter like, hey Dan, I'm Devin, I'm a former Daily Aztec alum. Like, I'd like to ask you a few questions. And he gets back to me and he gives me his phone number, and I call him or whatever. And he's like, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, oh, hey, good seeing you. And I'm all nervous and jittery because I'm like, I almost feel like I never talked to somebody on the phone in my life. And one thing led to another, and we're talking about the field, and I think he's a great person too, because he's been through a lot of different experiences with North County Times and all these other papers that he's been with here in San Diego, and what he's doing now at the MLB. I mean, so interviewing people or talking to people like that, even just asking them about advice in the field, I think it's so humbling, because like they've seen a lot of stuff. And you obviously haven't seen a lot of stuff because you're young and you're just getting into this. And so I think it helps bring a better perspective as far as what you can expect. I think a lot of young journalists don't really know what to look forward to, or they're sinking into the unknown. And, getting experience from people like him, it helps a ton as far as getting you where you want to go.
All right. Final topic. Advice that you would give to your younger self. If you could go back in time, what would you tell yourself at age 12 or you're at age 15, or as you're leaving high school and starting college? What are some things that you wish you had known sooner that you would tell yourself?
I would tell myself it'll all be all right. I think in high school I was a little bit uncertain because initially what's funny is I actually wanted to be a political science major, and I was applying to all these schools for that, and then I got rejected by a lot of schools, and then I applied to San Diego State for journalism because I was like, why not do something like that? I mean, I wasn't really 100% committed to it yet, because I was just like, let's see what happens. Mm-hmm. And then I remember my first day there, and I'm taking all these classes, and I just remember like my first journalism class, it was like in a lecture hall with like 500 students. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, I'm like, how am I going to, this is the field I want to go into. Like, there's so many people in here. I don't know if I'm going to really be able to get an appreciation or get something out of this. And I remember the first day that we had people from the Daily Aztec speak to the class. They went out and spoke to people in the class, and then I ended up, getting in touch with the people, and that's how one thing led to another. And so I would just tell myself that it'll all be all right. Life has its way of finding you to get you to where you want to go. And I'll always say, just stick to it. Don't doubt yourself. And of course, be confident in who you are as a person. I think that's the biggest thing. A lot of people, including me when I was younger, had a lot of self-doubt, and I'll just say it always works out. It'll always work out. That's what I'll say.
All right, Devin, this is really good stuff. I love your perspective. I wish that I had your perspective when I was your age. Thank you. Continued success. Stay in touch. Make sure that you mentor people the way that Amber helped you, and the way that Aaron Tolentino helped you, and the way that Dan Hayes helped you. Continue to help others along the way. Pay it forward. Yeah,
of course. Thanks for having me, Josh. Great talking to you, and appreciate being able to have a platform like this where I can help people, of course.
And of course, if you're a San Diego State student and you liked what you just heard from Devin, reach out to him. I'm not going to give you how to do that. Use your journalism skills. Find Devin, reach out to him, learn from him. If you are an alum and you're listening to this podcast, reach out to me, reach out to Temple Northrop, get involved in the university, get involved in JMS. You can mentor students. You can be a guest speaker. You can do it via Zoom. You can donate money. They'll always take money. Just find a way to give back. That's the purpose of this podcast, is to help connect people. And so thank you for listening. Once again, my name is Josh Suchon. I'm your host, and we will talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Where You At podcast. This is Amy J. Smith from the class of 98. Thanks to Martine Marine for creating the music you're hearing right now, and Alex Piscatelli for her work on the podcast name and the artwork on social media. And a reminder to SDSU alums, we really want to know, where you at? Tell us about your career. Get involved in the department. You can donate your time or your money. You can mentor students. You can speak in the classroom, in person or Zoom. You can provide internship opportunities to students. Help us grow the department. Again, thanks for listening. Subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Recommend us a future guest. And go Aztecs!